Good evening, everybody. I'm Chris Preston with Idaho 2 Fly. First, I'd like to apologize for the confusion about tonight's class. I'm not sure quite how it happened. All our classes are on Wednesday nights, and I just got the invitation kind of sent out wrong. Hope it didn't mess you up, and I hope you're all joining us tonight on Wednesday. Our classes are going to be on Wednesday nights from here on out. So our classes are brought to you by Idaho 2 Fly. And Idaho 2 Fly is a volunteer organization that was started about 8 years ago to support men who have cancer. Traditionally, we did this by having retreats where we would take men away for a weekend, have facilitated discussions, help them deal with their cancer better. But with COVID-19, we've had to change the way we do business. So now we do this Fly Fishing 101, for instance, and we do Zoom support meetings. The Zoom support meetings are, again, following the pattern that we do at retreats with facilitated discussions. But with our Fly Fishing 101, it's hard to believe this is our 6th week and our 6th class. We're very pleased about tonight's class. It's going to be on fly casting. We have 2 more classes that we're going to have for you. In June, we're very excited. We'll have more news about this later, but we have a member of Fly Fish USA, a bronze and silver medal winner in the World Championships, who's going to actually be teaching us about European nymphing. That's going to be great. And next week, or possibly the week after, depending on how things go, and you'll be getting messages about this, we're going to have John Wolters, angler, owner of Angler's Fly Shop here in Boise, do a segment called What's Bugging John? So we've talked about all these different aspects of fly fishing, and you're probably wondering, well, what fly should I use, and what do these terms mean? So you hear terms like BWO or PMD. Well, that's fly fish speak for pale morning dun, a mayfly, or for PMD is pale morning dun, BWO is blue wing olive. If somebody's talking brachycentris, it means caddis, the Mother's Day caddis. So he's going to go over that if you're in Southwest Idaho, this is a bug you're likely to see on the stream, and this is the flies you need to represent those, the imitations you need to imitate the real fly. So I think it's going to be very informative and real knowledge that you can take to the stream and work with. So we're very excited about that. So if you'd like to know more about Idaho 2 Fly and our mission and what we do, again, as I mentioned, we started about 8 years ago supporting men with cancer. When men are diagnosed with cancer, everybody deals with their cancer in their own way. And with our facilitated discussions, whether they're at retreats or a Zoom discussion meeting, it helps them articulate their feelings and make them understand that they're not alone, that this is not, unfortunately, a very exclusive fraternity that they've been inducted into, and that these meetings can really help them and make them understand that they need to share their feelings with their family, because their families go through this with them whether they want them to or not. So we found these meetings to be very successful in helping men communicate how they feel about the disease, how they deal with their disease, and they really work. So if you know a man who has been recently diagnosed with cancer, is in remission, and you could refer them to us. We still have a couple slots open for our last retreat of this year, which is going to be in October at Three Rivers Ranch. I think we have 2 or 3 openings, and then our Zoom meetings, which are forming all the time. So if you find somebody that has cancer, have them call us, have them get on our website, because we'd love to help them out. We're very passionate about helping guys with cancer. We're a volunteer organization where most of us have a very personal connection to cancer, either because we have cancer ourselves, we have loved ones with cancer, or both. Please refer them to us. So coming up, we have Idaho Gives. It starts April 29th through May 6th, and this is your chance to help nonprofits that resonate with you. And hopefully Idaho 2 Fly is one that does. So if you get on the website, either for Idaho 2Fly or Idaho Gives, you can get a lot more information about how you can make the donations and take care of things. So tonight's class, we have a really good class in store for you. John Wolter, owner of Angler's Fly Shop here in Boise, is going to teach us about how to cast a fly rod. If you can't cast a fly and deliver the fly, this is a very frustrating sport. The great part about these casting lessons are when you learn some of these basics, when you're having a bad day on the river, you can just remember the basics. How do I pick it up? How do I lay it down? You can take this video out to the park with you, watch it on your phone, back it up, go over it time and time again. Go out there with your friends and your family, and everybody can learn. When you want to be a tennis player, you go practice. You see guys that go to the golf range to learn how to be a better golfer. So there's nothing wrong with going to the city park and learning how to cast the fly. When you're using a spinning rod, or a casting rod, it's the weight of the lure that pulls out the line. In fly fishing, it's the weight of the line that takes out the fly. So you really need to learn this sport. I'm sure you're going to enjoy tonight's presentation. So without further ado, here's John.
Great to be here again for the final part of the Fly Fishing 101. It's been kind of a fun journey to go through that. It was great to get started out with it, and now we got to finish up with the casting part of it. Today is going to be that casting part of it. For those who've watched the whole program, on the very first night, I gave you 3 basic elements that you need to learn how to do in order to fly fish, and that first element was learn how to cast, and that's what we're going to work on today. So let's go ahead and get started with that. Set up a couple of rings. I like to stand in one ring, or have my students stand in one ring. We'll cast to a second ring. That way we keep still. And I'm just going to have you kind of follow this along tonight. The video will be up for a while, so you can go back and review it, and even bring it out with you if you're going to do your casting out in the field along these lines. But let's set up the rings about 36 feet away. Stand in a spot where you can stay still, and then have some kind of a target that you can work towards. I'm a right-hand caster, right-hand dominant. I have a tendency of saying right hand a lot instead of rod hand or line hand. If you're left-handed, just kind of translate back and forth accordingly. I'll do my best to stay consistent, but I'll be honest with you, I probably won't. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to give our rod a handshake. We're going to reach into with our dominant hand, and I like to lead with my thumb at the front. It's okay to lead with your thumb. If you break your wrist a lot, you may end up leading with your index finger or doing a combination of the two. But what we want to do is make sure that we have something solid in front of us. We just don't want to grip the rod because it's going to be impossible to keep it controlled. So in this case, I'm going to reach with that thumb. I'm going to lead with my dominant foot, my right foot to begin with. And that way it's just going to help still the body slightly. I'm going to have you extend your elbow out in front of you and then slightly tilt it in. It feels a little bit uncomfortable, but if you can slightly tilt it in a little bit, it'll help steady the hand. And a V is going to form between our forearm and the handle of the rod. That's going to be a good indication that we're keeping our forearm and our wrist tight or locked. If we start breaking our wrist a lot, I use the letter scenario. We'll start to see the L form. And if we're breaking that wrist a lot, I'll mention the L, and we end up overcompensating it with an I. I know it's difficult, but we're going to do our best to keep that wrist locked as much as we possibly can. Little increases and decreases to the V's are just fine. What we don't want to do is make those big L's and I's. All right, so elbow slightly in front. Kind of cocked in a little bit. We can cant that rod tip just slightly to our right-hand side or our dominant side away from us. So when we make that cast, the fly line is away from us. And we're going to go through 3 basic parts of the cast. Do it without a fly line, and then we'll put a fly line on and show you how it's going to look. So the first one is moving the rod tip between 2 stop-start points. If 12 o'clock is directly overhead, your first stop-start point on your front portion will be the 2 o'clock position. And your hand position will be just like such, and the rod tip will be about that 2 o'clock. To find the back stop-start point, all we need to do is just lift up on our forearm. When our forearm goes at a 90 degree from the ground, and as long as that V maintains the integrity, we'll be exactly at that 10 o'clock position behind us. If we break our wrist and we form the L, my rod tip is going to be at the 9 o'clock position. You're going to be mowing the lawn or catching bushes. So just have to look at that. I try to keep my focus forward or slightly on my hand when I cast. What I don't want to do is look behind me. Some people encourage doing that. The problem that I have found is if we start to look behind, our rod tip is going to move out of the position we want it to be in. Come forward to 2, come back to 10. And that's all the hand position, that's all the movement we're going to make with our rod tip. Right? Our hand is going to travel about 8 to 10 inches, maybe 12 inches. Our rod tip is traveling at 8 to 10 feet. Think of your elbow as a lever. Right? We want to maximize the distance that our rod tip is traveling, minimize the distance that our hand is traveling. And that way we're going to accomplish as much leverage as we can as that get that fly line out. The second part of it are the strokes. There's 2 strokes to a complete cast. We've got the back stroke and we've got the forward stroke. The back stroke is a pickle, I won't lie to you. We do nothing this direction behind us. In this world, we want to try to keep it consistent. The same amount of energy we put on our forward stroke is going to be the same amount of energy we put on our back stroke. By doing so, you're going to be able to maintain the integrity of that fly line above your rod tip and give you the maximum amount of control. So, the best way that I can describe those strokes to you is that they are an accelerated stop. Gosh, this is paramount. An accelerated stop. You have to apply momentum through the casting stroke. And if you do so, you'll really be able to control that fly line. If there's any one thing you take away from today, accelerate the stroke. Accelerate the movement coming forward. So this is what it's going to look like. We're going to start slow, and then we're going to finish fast with a solid stop. Start slow, finish fast with a solid stop. And you'll start to hear a little whistle to the rod tip. I don't want to hear a big whoosh. If you're doing a whoosh, it means you're moving the rod tip way too fast. You're accelerating way too fast. So a nice little solid whistle. That's all we're looking for. Accelerate the stop, accelerate the stop, accelerate the stop, and make solid stops on those. The final part of the cast has to do with timing. We're going to start off with about 20 to 25 feet of fly line outside the rod tip. And I know that doesn't sound like a lot. But when you add the length of the rod, 9 feet, and maybe a 9-foot leader, you'll be about 40 feet away from where you're standing. 80% of the fish that I catch in a river is going to be within 40 feet of where I'm standing. We're going to do our best to get close to them. And so this is a great distance for you. At that distance, the casting rhythm is going to be a 4-count rhythm. The time it takes you to go from the front position to the back position is the same amount of time we're going to allow for a pause. That pause is going to allow that fly line to extend behind us. So as that rod tip comes back, we pause, we allow that line a chance to extend behind us, it's going to begin to bend the rod. And we refer to this as a load. And if you can tap into this when you bring it forward, you build up that load, you stop, and like a catapult, you shoot out. If you come back, you wait too long, the load will take place, the rod will flex back straight, the line will start to drop, and you have to throw your line forward. Vice versa, if you don't wait at all and you just move your rod tip back and forth, you're going to have a series of S's. The line has never a chance to get behind you. Timing is important to it. It's a 4-count rhythmic motion. You're not a robotic motion, rhythmic motion. So we're going to start in that front position. We'll bring it back. That's 1 count. The second count's the pause. The third count's the extension forward, the stroke forward. And the fourth count is allowing that line to extend out in front of us. This is what it looks like. 5. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. Okay, so we've got the basics. Let's go ahead and string the rod and see what it actually looks like. Believe it or not, there's even rules of how we string a rod. First thing we want to do is we want to pull out this clear line called the leader. And we want to pull all of that out. Make sure that you come in front of the reel. There's a bar usually right underneath the reel. You want to come in front of that. We'll pull all that out. I'm not sure if that looks, you can see that coil. Okay. So when you pull out a leader, it's usually nice and coiled. It takes a set or a memory of the reel. So Give that a good pull. Straighten that leader out. Get that all clean. It's going to make a big difference on how it turns over in your accuracy. At this moment, I'm going to find the end between the leader and the fly line. I'm going to hold that with my dominant hand, and I'm just going to strip out a bunch of fly line. 3 or 4 good pulls. Grab the fly line that's looped and run that through your guide. By doing it this way and not just holding your leader and trying to string it, if you happen to slip, it'll catch. It's a whole lot easier to hold on to than that leader. And we'll run that through. Absolutely set your rod on the grass as you're doing that. Okay, the leader hasn't fully extended out. One little whip and it's all the way out. So we're going to strip out enough line so that we can get to our target. At this moment, you can kind of just wiggle it out for the most part. If you just want to just lay it out there in that distance, that's fine as well. Reel up any of the slack. And I'm going to have you just grab the line with your right hand to begin with so that we don't have to worry about the drag mechanism. And I'm going to throw one more thing at you before we really get started. When we fish, you kind of get yourself lined up and down. Rod tip's going to be in that down position. When we fish, your rod tip is going to be in the down position. When we make this cast, after we've made our forward stroke, we're going to do what we call a pickup laydown. We're going to throw that line out. We're going to stop at that 2 o'clock position. We're going to let that line extend out in front of us. And then we're just going to lower the rod tip to the grass, which means we have to pick it up from the grass to make our cast. This is going to be a fluid motion, but there's 2 parts to it. The first part is just picking it up to that 2 o'clock position. And again, just a nice fluid motion. Pick it up to that 2 o'clock position, and then we'll start our cast. Accelerate the stop behind us and pause. Accelerate the stop in front of us and pause. And then lower the rod tip to the grass. This is called the pickup laydown. And absolutely want to just aim for your target. This is just a pickup and laydown. If you want to become a great caster, you do lots of pickup and laydown. All right. Once you do a few of those, then I want you to get used to holding the line in your non-dominant hand. Line hand, in my case, my left hand. And so we're going to strip out some line and let that just gather at your feet. And then I'm going to reach up to my front guide with my left hand. I'm going to grab it with my left hand. Your left hand, your line hand, is your reel. Your reel really just holds line for the time being. Your right hand becomes your drag. And as soon as the fly line is on the water and you're fishing, the first thing you're going to do is you're going to put that fly line into your right hand. By pinching that line against the cork, it's going to allow you to put pressure against the fish, control the fish, and then with your left hand as your reel, you'll be able to strip in from behind. And I'll show you all of that as we go through this. For the time being, we're just going to continue with the pickup laydown, but we're going to hold the line in our left hand. I like to extend my left hand just slightly in front of my reel. That way it really keeps the fly line from going around the butt of the reel, and it happens. So if you notice, as you're casting, your line starts to extend out behind, your left hand is just too far behind the right hand. Reverse that order a little bit. Get that line hand slightly in front of the rod head. We're going to make the same cast, pick up, lay down. Hold this line tight. It's got to try to get away from you. Hold that line tight, make that same cast. Pick up and lay down. Accelerate the stop, accelerate the stop. Pick up, pause, lay down, pause. Pick up, lay down. Accelerate that stop, accelerate that stop. All right, so once we get a bunch of those, now we're going to work on when we're going to let line go. What I'd like to tell you, you're going to be able to get into the water, and as soon as you get positioned, the fish are going to come out of the depths and just move exactly this far away from you. But unfortunately, that doesn't happen. We're going to have to sometimes get a little further out. And letting the line go or shooting line out is done at one specific time during the casting motion. And that's exactly when you stop on your forward stroke. Once you stop your cast at that 2 o'clock position, it's going to allow you a moment to let some fly line out. And I'm just going to drop the line out of my my left hand. I'm just going to open my left hand, drop it out of it. And this is what it's going to look like. Everything stays consistent. Try not to put more energy into it than you need. Same casting stroke. All it is timing to let line go. We're going to pick it up to that back position, front, open that hand, all that fly line is going to extend out. I did nothing different with my casting stroke. All I did was let the line go was exactly at that 2 o'clock position. Now at this moment, I've got an extra 10 feet of fly line out. And I don't want to cast that. I want to retrieve that line back in so it's at the same distance it was when we first started. So the rod tip goes down, steady that rod tip. We don't want it bouncing all over the place. Steady the rod tip. Grab the line in your left hand, put it into your right hand, and then we're going to retrieve that fly line back in so that your yarn or your indicator at the end of your fly line is right at that same spot. So I've got my 10 feet in. I'll grab the line again with my left hand, drop it out of my right hand, rod hand. I'll pick it up, and I'll shoot it out again. Do that again, Becky. Shoot. Stop. Let that line go. If you bring your rod tip straight down to the grass, as you extend that forward, the line isn't going to travel any further out. As soon as that line touches the grass, as far out as it's going. So make sure you stop at that 2 o'clock position. Let that line go. Keep that rod tip up high. Then you can lower it down. Strip it back in and try it again. Stop. And open your left hand. Nice and smooth. Okay, so once we do the pickup lay down, the next step in shooting some line out, the next step is going to be applying a false cast into the casting stroke. A false cast is a fake cast. A false cast allows the angler to build a little extra line speed to maybe cast a little bit further. Repositioning the fly, if you cast upstream and it drifts downstream and you want to cast back upstream again, you can apply a false cast to it. It allows you to dry your fly off. It allows you to shoot a little extra line a little bit at a time. False casts are important, but false cast is a means to the end, and we don't want to go out there and do nothing but false casts. So there's really never any reason to do more than 2. And keep that in mind. I mean, the more that fly line is in the air, the more chances and more likely it is to get tangled. So 2 false casts. So we're going to do a pickup, a false cast, and lay down. On the false cast, when we stop at that 2 o'clock position, we're going to stop, give it that 1 count. You can physically watch that fly line extend out in front of you, and before it fully extends out, you're going to bring it back. Give it that pause in your back cast and do the same. And this is what it's going to look like live. Pick up, false cast, and then the lay down. Stop, and then drop the rod tip back down. So we've done the pickup lay down, we've done the false casting, we've shot line. You can also shoot line when you're false casting, no problem. Pick it up, lay it, pick up, false cast, and on your lay down, just stop, shoot the line, and then you can drop that rod tip down. Practice those as well. Okay, so the final step is then thinking about setting ourselves up for success. If we remember back to the first class when I talked about the casting part of it, I actually referred to it as delivery. The casting part of itself is just getting the fly to where it needs to be. And it doesn't necessarily need to look great, just as long as it gets there. If we can remember back to my friend Todd, who was probably the worst caster out there, this looked like he was having a seizure, just trying to get the fly out there, but he was able to. The second part of it is what the fish are going to judge you on. How does that fly look when it's on the water? When we fish in rivers, a lot of times we want that fly, almost all the time, we want that fly to act like it's not attached to anything, especially if it's a surface fly, a dry fly, or a wet fly. And so it's critical that we have slack on the water in order to create those natural drifts. Slack. Being able to put slack on the water is going to be the difference between making a great min and affecting fly. So on this part of it, we're going to go back to the stop, the pick up and lay down. And then I'm going to apply what I call the stop and drop. I'm going to stop the fly line up high. I'm going to allow that line to extend out in front of me. And then I'm going to lower my rod tip down at the right time so that I can create slack or S's on the water. And we'll see how this looks. So when we made the first pickup and lay down, our fly line was straight as an arrow, a laser beam cast, if you will. And if there's any currents on the water that move at different speeds between us and the fly, that's going to affect how that fly is going to behave on the water. If we have a fast current going from left to right, that fly might start dragging downstream and a belly will form in the line. And if it's too straight of a cast, there's nothing as an angler I can do about it. And then if the current is coming from left to right, the belly will start to form. Your fly line will be swept downstream and your fly will follow that course. Straight cast, line sweeping downstream. We're going to extend that rod tip up and we're going to stop it at that 2 o'clock position. And then if I lower my rod tip down at the right time, all the slack now that is at my rod tip will weave out or S out towards my target. Stop and drop. Now we can start to see a little bit of slack forming on the water. We want our fly to hit first, ideally, and the line to follow suit. Can you see that line? Extend out. Want all that nice little slack on the water. So if we have a fast current going downstream and a belly starts to form, my fly is still exactly where I had cast it and still following the course of the river in which it's sitting on, that same current. And then that will allow me to move the line down the back. Line management is the difference between catching fish and not catching fish. Getting a great drift, allowing that fly to act like it's completely at the whim of the current it's sitting on, and allowing the fish to recognize that food source, or dragging it downstream. Stop and drop. You'll get so good at this, you're going to be able to write your name in the fly line. Extend out. Stop and drop. Hit your targets. Drop her down. Pick up and lay down. Be patient with the drop. Stop and drop. Stop and drop. Learning how to cast isn't that something you do when you're on the river. When you're on the river, when you're on the lakes fishing, that's when you're performing your cast, you're fishing. Your focus should be on entirely different things. It's these park-like settings that are going to turn you into a great caster. So spend some time out here. There's no reason in the world to cast more than a half hour to 45 minutes. And in that time of frame, you're going to cast more there than you will all day when you're out fishing. Spend far more time looking for fish, getting our fly in there and letting the fly do what it's supposed to do on the water, not picking up and laying down a bunch of times. So find park settings, go out and cast, practice this, and let this become more of a muscle memory so that when you're out on the water, the last thing you're thinking about is 10 and 2 and accelerated stops and the timing. It just does its course. You watch great casters or great experienced fly fishermen, I guarantee you they're not thinking about any of this. Just like taking a breath of air, they're being able to pick up that line and throw it back down without thinking about it. And that's what you have to get into so that you can spend your time on the other two parts of the fishing aspect of finding fish.
Spend your time on the water fishing.
Time on the water. So you got to spend your time on the water fishing and less time on the water thinking about the casting parts of it back and forth. And if you can do that, you're going to be in good shape. I believe this video is going to be up for a long time.
Forever.
So feel free to just watch it at your convenience. As you get started casting, you're going to find yourself observing others who are casting and picking up a lot of those little nuances and then applying that to your casting stroke. Everybody casts just a little bit differently, and eventually your elbow will start to relax, the movement will start to relax. You'll get everything taken care of, and if your casting stroke looks different than mine, it's okay. Again, the end justifies the means. Ask a lot of questions if you have any issues, and we'll do our best to answer those accordingly. And get out and practice a whole lot of times, and get out and fish, even more important.
Hi, everybody. I'd like to thank John for a wonderful presentation tonight. I think we've all picked up hints on how to cast better. Even if you're an experienced fly fisherman, there are things in tonight's presentation you can do to make you a better fly fisherman. And again, like I said, tennis players practice, golfers practice. There's nothing wrong with you practicing your fly casting. All it's going to do is make you a better fly fisherman. So next week, or possibly the week after, we'll keep you posted on this. We're very excited to have our next presentation will be What's Bugging John Wolter? And what that is, to remind you, John is going to talk about what insects are hatching, what flies you need to have in your fly box. Do you need to have dry flies? Because some insects, the dry fly phase of their life isn't nearly as important as having the proper nymph. And the nymph is what lives under the water, the immature status. So we're really looking forward to that. And then June 9th, mark it on your calendar. We're going to have a wonderful European nymphing presentation that I think you're all going to love. I love European nymphing, and I can't wait for this presentation. We've got a real pro who's going to help us out with it. So I hope you all enjoyed tonight's presentation, and I hope that you watch us again next week. Be sure to share with all your friends what we're doing, and thanks very much.